Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we do have snow and ice warnings issued for parts of Scotland through Christmas Day and Boxing Day. We'll have a look at the UKV, look at the precipitation and the temperature, as yes, there's a bit of snow around through Christmas Day and Boxing Day, with a cold air mass pushing through for about 24 hours before it does go pretty mild and westerly next week. Temperatures will be coldest in the north, generally just below average. In the south, it'll be above average, but for all, it will be unsettled. There will be a lot of precipitation around, and perhaps some very strong winds later next week. And we can actually see some really quite stormy conditions to end the year. We'll then head through the GFS, GEM, ECMWF, and the ensembles, and we'll be able to see what's going to be happening, as I said, through the end of the year into the start of 2023. It's looking highly likely we will start with nothing particularly cold, generally average to above average, with westerly conditions, at least for the start. Some models, like the GFS, are hinting at a higher pressure build towards sort of the 5th of January or so, and that could turn us drier, maybe colder with an inversion. And again, if the high pressure gets far enough north, we could start to put in an easterly wind, which would be, of course, colder, but that is in the longer term. The majority for the next week or two of generally westerly, very unsettled, stormy conditions, cooler in the north, milder in the south. So pretty much typical winter conditions that we've got acclimatized to over the last sort of 5 years or so, with quite a lack of cold weather, really, through most of the winter. Of course, we have seen cold weather this winter so far, but this is sort of weather we have seen through many of the winters that have gone past, where it has just remained everything in from the west. So that's the sort of pattern over the course of the next week or two. So if you are looking for cold weather, unfortunately, it's probably at least until maybe the 5th to 10th of January before we see anything, any real potential return. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if we do start on the live radar, you can see at the moment we've got heavier rain in the west with lower pressure approaching, slightly higher pressure further eastwards, and we've got slightly drier conditions, but rain will be pushing in from the west over the course of today. Quite heavy rain over parts of Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and into Scotland at the moment, all of it falling pretty much as rain, but there will be some snow, as I said, through tomorrow, Christmas Day, in the north as the cold front does sweep in. If you do put on the temperatures, you'll be able to see that it's not too bad around 1 p.m. today, generally around average, maybe slightly above in the far south, with temperatures in around that sort of 8 to 10 degree mark quite widely, perhaps cooler across the north, but again, that's pretty much average, so these sort of mid-single digits for this time of year. Now, if you go over to the weather warnings, you'll be able to see we've got a snow and ice warning issued for Scotland through Sunday and Monday, so Christmas Day and Boxing Day from 9 p.m. until 6 p.m. On Boxing Day, frequent blustery snow showers are likely to cause some travel disruption to higher routes. Again, 1 to 3 centimetres are possible to low-lying areas in form of temporary accumulations. 5 to 10 centimetres over hills, ice surface will be additional hazard, and snow will become increasingly confined to higher ground through Monday morning, with a further 10 centimetres or so possible by the end of the day. Strong to gale force winds, bringing the risk of drifting and blizzards for upland areas, with a small isolated risk of power outages as the snow and strong wind affect power lines. High likelihood, lower end of the impacts. Again, nothing too unusual for this time of year, but of course it's impacting the Christmas period, so there could be additional impacts from this for people travelling or people out and about doing stuff. So yeah, there could be a technical white Christmas in the north and the west. It's looking quite likely there'll be a technical white Christmas, and potentially even snow on the ground for some in the north and west late on Christmas Day. But for the majority, it is looking likely Christmas will be generally average conditions, temperatures in around that sort of 7 to 10 degree mark, and generally pretty dry before showers do push through later in the day. Now, if you go to the UKV and have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, you can see as we head through this afternoon, you can see showers pushing in from the west, and they become slightly more widespread, pushing inland over the course of the evening, giving some heavier rain in places. As we head into Christmas Day, you can see showers remain in the far west, do push eastwards through the day, but the far east will remain fairly dry through Christmas Day. And if you see through Sunday afternoon, so Christmas Day afternoon, showers pushing through in bands, some of them quite heavy, some of them lighter, and snow starting to fall across Scotland. As we head through the evening, all those showers push southwards and eastwards, giving quite widespread rain. So most places will see rain on Christmas Day. It'll just be about avoiding when those showers do push through. It's not a wall of rain, but it is quite frequent showers forming up into lines. So if you do see rain, it'll probably be setting for an hour or two before passing. And as we head through Sunday evening, again, snow starting to fall in the far north of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland, so a technical white Christmas possible there, and maybe snow on the ground through higher routes. As we head through Boxing Day, the snow risk continues across Scotland, quite heavy, blustery showers, and then as we head into Boxing Day afternoon, many areas in the south and the east are actually quite dry, and it's actually been quite pleasant. So if you're out and about on Boxing Day, it doesn't look too bad for quite a lot of England and Wales. Scotland, Northern England, Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland will see a lot of showers over higher ground, and the further north you are, most likely these will be having a wintry feel to them and wintry nature, so it could be some sleet and snow out there quite widely in the north through Monday afternoon. And as we head into Tuesday, you see a weather front bumps into that cold air, could be some snow over the higher ground, but it's introducing much milder air, so it's all going to be turning to rain. As we head through the 27th, quite a horrible day for the south, but further northwards and westwards, slightly drier, but with showers starting to pack in. But yeah, a lot of thick cloud and heavier rain in the south and the east. And as we head into the 28th, big low pressure arriving. You can see that sort of hook in the lower pressure, very heavy rain and snow over higher ground of Scotland, and this is accompanied by by some very deep areas of low pressure. Could be extremely strong winds accompanied by this. You can see that hook there showing the very strong development of this low, and then we go to very unsettled windy conditions. And again, if we put on the wind gusts later next week, you can see widely 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts, maybe 60 mile per hour, 70 mile per hour coast, and maybe 80 miles per hour plus through Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. Again, still 4 or 5 days away, this sort of very windy, unsettled, stormy spell, so things could still change, but for the time being, it is looking quite unsettled, and we'll have to pinpoint areas of low pressure later next week, where we could see some very stormy conditions, perhaps even a named storm. But again, we need to see those wind gusts widely around 80 to 80 plus miles per hour to be seeing something like that named. Now, if you put on the max temperatures, as of this afternoon, temperatures are widely around that sort of 6 to 10 degree mark, maybe 11 or 12 in the far south, and more towards freezing across Scotland. So colder in the north, milder in the south. Again, pretty standard for this time of year. As we head through this evening into Christmas Day, most will wake up to a frost-free morning. So if you are travelling on Christmas Day morning, it is going to be frost-free, 6 to 8 degrees quite widely, and it won't rise too much in the day, and by around 3 p.m, widely sort of 8 to 10 degrees, maybe 11 or 12 in the far southeast, turning colder in the north and the west. So it'll actually be slightly warmer in the morning than it will be in the afternoon for many areas of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland as that northwesterly air mass moves in. As we head through Sunday evening, widespread frost for northern areas and western areas through Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Northern England and Scotland. Widespread 0 degrees or lower than that. Trying to spread further south and eastwards before day comes, and you can see it gets around 4 to 6 degrees widely, cold further northwards, but it's really not going to last all too long. Monday evening to Tuesday could be a frost in northern and eastern areas, but weather fronts pushing in, and by Tuesday afternoon widely back towards 6 to 8 degrees, and as we head into Wednesday again, turning mild at 10 or 11 degrees, and that's the same into Thursday. Again, slightly colder air masses coming in at times will give temperatures towards the mid to low single digits, maybe isolated frosts, but again, nothing too unusual or cold for this time of year. Now, if you go over to the GFS and have a look at what's going on in the longer term, you can see at the moment we've got westerly winds trying to push in. That northwesterly arrives for Boxing Day, and that could give Christmas Day evening into Boxing Day, giving wintry showers in places. And then we go into a very unsettled westerly spell. The jet stream pushes southwards, and that pushes the big wind fields onto us and the centre of the lows close by. Very cold air is feeding in from Greenland into these low pressure systems. Milder air is coming up from the Azores, and that collision of air masses here is fueling these low pressure systems pushing in off the Atlantic. It's going to give very unsettled, windy conditions. Again, we'll pinpoint these probably in the next few days, as these could develop quite significantly. But again, we need to wait for the short range models to resolve them, as it's going to be little features and very tight squeezes of the isobars in a few places that could give disruptive conditions. Beyond that, generally we stay westerly. Could be a brief northerly there for a time. Again, pushing the colder air mass in for Christmas Day, and eventually the GFS actually has proper high pressure building in for the first few days of January, and as I said, around the 5th is when that high pressure really takes over. It does have a go at trying to pull in some colder air in from Eastern Europe, but the majority of that cold air actually floods down into Southeast Europe. So very cold air is close by, but we generally stay under the high pressure, which doesn't really penetrate into the Arctic at all, sort of stays over the top of us. For many areas in the central, eastern, southern areas, it would probably be quite cold, probably towards average or slightly below average, with an inversion, even though the air masses are generally mild, an inversion towards the surface mean temperatures in the day, sort of mid-single digits, overnight towards freezing. So cold, but nothing especially cold for this time of year. But interesting signs high pressure is going to return, when the majority of models have us remaining westerly. As I said, if that high pressure gets slightly further northwards, pulls in a slack easterly wind or a brisk easterly wind, then we could go much colder, as generally sort of mid to end of January is pretty much the coldest time of the year for the UK in terms of the air masses around us. That's when sort of the air masses do peak at their coldest extent, and of course we've still got very low daylight hours and low solar energy, so it means everything can culminate. So yes, you don't need exceptionally cold air masses in January to be getting very very cold or wintry conditions. So even the -5 isotherm comes in, it could give us very cold conditions, like it did in December when it built for many days. But earlier this month where it built for many days. So that is something we do need to keep an eye on. Even a moderately cold air mass can give very cold conditions through sort of the peak time in January, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But for the time being, the GFS just suggests high pressure over the top of us. If you look at the GM, see how that does compare. Again, a westerly wind pushing in at the moment. Brief northwesterly later on Christmas Day, and then eventually we go very unsettled. You can see very rapidly developing low pressure system there. That would give very strong winds. Again, look at the 10-meter wind speed there. Very, very strong wind gusts in the Irish Sea. Again, you'd be thinking perhaps sort of 80, 90 miles per hour there, extremely strong. Again, these are in knots, sustained winds, so roughly sort of 50, 60 mile per hour sustained winds here, so it would be very, very strong on this very deep area of low pressure. That could be quite stormy there later next week, but again, we're not seeing that on all the runs, and this is why I said we have to wait probably the next few days to be seeing exactly what's happening. The general outlook, though, next week is going to be unsettled and stormy. Beyond that, though, we do go westerly, still perhaps less stormy, with the jet stream returning slightly more towards us. The percentage of the low stay more towards Iceland and Greenland, but again, it probably turns us actually more sustained, milder conditions, but again, still quite unsettled. If you do look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare. Again, a westerly flow continues, and that goes all the way to next week, where deep low pressure systems could take over, and it stays very unsettled before eventually at day 10 high pressure tries to build in, but doesn't have much luck, and the westerlies hold on. It does turn us slightly milder for a time, but just with these milder air masses colliding with the colder air masses, it does generally just keep us unsettled, fueling the low pressure system. So yeah, signs of a high pressure build there towards the start of January, but nowhere near as much of a high pressure build as the GFS was showing. Now, if we do finish by looking at the ensembles, if we start on the GFS ensembles, you can see generally around average over the next week to the end of the year, and then January is going to start mild, generally a degree or two above average, and the majority of runs are quite mild, very few going cold at all. Precipitation does peak towards the end of next week. That's when we have the very unsettled low pressure systems pushing in, stormy conditions, and as we head into early January, precipitation does diminish, and that's symbolic probably of that higher pressure build. You can see there for the majority of the ensemble members, we do go higher pressure, not all go for a sustained high pressure block or high pressure system. Many here for around 1,010 to 1,020 millibars are more likely in around that sort of transient higher pressure. Things like the GFS, which is going towards 1,040, those are more sustained higher pressure systems. If you go to the ECMWF, see how that does compare. Again, generally around average, or sort of oscillating above and below over the next week, and then we stay well above average, maybe even 3 or 4 degrees above average there through the first week of January, so pretty mild and westerly. And again, if we have a look at the sea level pressure, yes, a pressure build, but not as much of a signal here through the start of January, so not as much a signal for high pressure to build in, keeping us probably more here, more unsettled here, more westerly. So yeah, the next few weeks, if you're a fan of mild westerly and pretty wet and windy conditions, this weather's for you. But if you're a fan of the colder, drier, or even wintry weather, then we're not seeing much of that over the course of the next few weeks. Of course, we've still got 2 months left of meteorological winter. As I said, sort of peak conditions do arrive for the second half of January, so we'll have to see what happens then. But for the time being, through the Christmas period and into early January, it's looking quite mild westerly and quite stormy at times as well. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.